Hi, today I want to talk about what I call the Dasgupta model, which is essentially a solo model that takes natural capital into account, and I'll post the link to the chapter I'm referring to right below in the comments. What we're going to do to motivate the whole thing is we're going to cook a French fish soup called a bouillabaisse in this short clip. And a fish soup is, so to speak, our output. We usually denominate the output in our production function as y. So what do we need to make such a fish soup? Well, let's go back to the production structure of the Solo model, and it will tell us what we need for a fish soup is, well, as always, capital and labor and some production technology. And you here have the fishing rod in that case, which is our capital. And you have this hands-on fisherman. I have to disappoint you, he doesn't exist really. It's AI generated and he has some education level, and that's our labor input into the production structure. So that's how the Cobb-Douglas structure here would look like. We have our fishing rod, we have our fisherman, and with certain fishing technology, so he for sure will be a better fisherman than I am, because I never went fishing. He'll produce the bouillabaisse that is our output in this production structure, right? This is what the Solo model would tell you. The question is, of course, in that production structure, what's missing? Well, we haven't seen any fish yet, and the fish is a resource that lives in the natural environment where it swims around and it goes into a fish soup, right? And this is something the Solo model doesn't account for, and it doesn't account for the fact that we're surrounded by the biosphere, like this lake, from where we can get our resources from. And that may make sense in the context where the Solo model developed. We took the biosphere maybe as given, but those days, unfortunately, it no longer is. And for the fisherman, it does matter whether the lake is really like here you see in the background, or whether it's looking like this, right? This was taken, I've taken this picture around 2022 in Eastern Austria. And it was the first year this lake has completely dried up because of climate change and global heating, right? And the fisherman will not be very productive with his fishing rod there anymore. And this is what the Dasgupta model tries to take into account. So what will be added to the production structure is, on the one hand side, it accounts for the fact that we use natural resources in our production. That would be the fish, okay? This is the flow of resources from natural capital that enters the production structure and accounts for the fact that in production and in economic activity we draw from nature. And the fact that there is a lake in the first place, that's adding essentially to our productivity. That's the stock of nature, the biosphere, the stock of natural capital that is at the same time supplying those fish, right, or the resources we are using. That term, the S, is quite innovative in the production structure and captures the fact that in our economic activity we depend on nature. And you will see some production structures in recent models, macroeconomic models, that have the similar flavor, that have some bioeconomic aspects that captures productivity and that would depend on nature, and the use of resources that's in many economic fields actually quite common also. Resource economics, environmental economics, okay? So the production structure has changed a lot, and now we want to understand a bit better, like how does this stock of nature that we're using, how does our lake, how does that develop over time, right? That's natural capital. And it regenerates at a certain rate. You can think about, so this rate is like whatever the lake supplies or how the lake recovers over each period, over each year. And that for the part of the model we're interested in, we will consider that a positive function of the stock of nature. What does that mean? If you think of a forest, right? A forest regenerates, right? Every fall you have like the trees, you have seeds falling down, and the seeds like are the basis for new trees. And the more trees you have in this forest, the more trees will grow in the following years, right? Whereas if you have only one or two trees there, you will have less growth or less recovery of the forest. Huh? So it's the same also for our small fish, right? You see here those fish, they really like each other, and sometime later you have like the fish giving some fish babies, right? And the more fish you have in the lake, the more fish babies you will get, so the stock of fish regenerates quicker or more at a higher rate. Okay, this is what this term, this function here is telling us. So that's the good part that happens to the stock of nature, that is added every year. But on the other hand, we're taking away resources, right? We're taking out the fish from the pond, or we're cutting down some trees in the forest, and that's something we take away from nature. And we do that with a certain efficiency, right? And this efficiency is let's call it alpha x, and that tells us, well, for a given amount of fish I take out, how much fish soup can I make, right? I can have a cool recipe where I have an excellent bouillabaisse, but can save a bit on the fish that I put into it, because I have other like cool flavors in that fish soup, so I don't need to take out that many fish from the lake. Okay, so that's our kind of bioproduction technology. No? That's one aspect, how we run down nature every year. And the other aspect is that our production leaves some waste, and also we have a efficiency there. So how to think about that term? Well, I don't know if you have ever been fishing, but in Austria, if you say like you're going fishing, it's like, hey, I'll be home late and I'll probably be drunk. So, after fishing, like some fishermen throws away their net or something else, or the beer cans they had during the long fishing day, right? So we always leave certain waste products. It may be that the fish soup goes into a can and is sold at a supermarket, so then we'll have the can, right? So there's always some production waste, and we can avoid that by increasing our waste efficiency, if you want to, our alpha set. But some waste will be there. And that's something that eats away from nature, because if you throw the beer cans into the lake, it will be bad for the fish. Or if you throw a fishing net in there, and some fish will die, so therefore the stock of nature will decline. So how does the biosphere therefore develop? Well, the change in the stock of natural capital is what natural capital can regenerate, minus what we take out from natural capital every year, minus our production waste. Okay, this is the kind of flow stock identity for nature. And then, this is instructive to split that up here for some reasons, but it also makes our life a bit more complicated. So let's do some definition here. And if you stare at that for a long time or a short time, you will see that this allows me, or allows Partha Dasgupta, to write the flow identity for the stock of nature, to write like this. And this is very handy. Why? I have the regenerative rate here, of course, right? And on the right hand side, I have a direct expression of my total output level, right? That's the total output level, divided by what I call personally bioeconomic efficiency. Okay, and from that we get a sustainability condition, right? Because whenever this part is larger, we're taking away more from nature than nature can recover. And we're eating into the stock of nature. We kind of, you can see this as a borrowing from nature. Okay, this is an unsustainable condition in the long run. Whereas if you manage for some points that the left-hand side is equal or larger than what we take out from nature, then you get a sustainability condition. Yeah? But the fact that we're not there, the fact that this right-hand side is much larger than the left-hand side, is what Dasgupta calls the impact inequality. So this means that our demand from nature is much higher than the supply that nature can generate every period of time, roughly by a factor of 1.75. If you consider the whole biosphere, which is of course tricky to measure in practice. And you have probably, if you follow the news, you have probably seen this number or this concept somewhere already, because every year in, late July, early August, somewhere here, you will see news somewhere which says, well, today is World Overshoot Day. At that day, I think it's July 22nd or something in those years, we have used up with our economic activity, we have used up the resources that nature can sustainably supply to us. And you see that some countries, including, Austria here, Russia, South Korea, of course, use up, like if everyone would live on the world like Austrians, we would use up our resources on March 29th already. If everyone lived like people in Uruguay or Indonesia, we would use it up in, late November, mid-December. Okay? So this concept that is very popular also builds on the idea of the impact inequality, and you can relate that back to the Dasgupta model. And more generally, I think there's two key insights you can derive from that model. Maybe you already get a sense for it, but it can be shown that the model implies that there's a limit to growth. Where does that come from? You will see in a production structure that the output level positively depends on your resources. That's, I think, relatively clear from a production structure. And you always have to use resources, right? If you set R to 0, then usually you don't get any output. No? So you have to use resources. But using resources means that you're running down your stock of natural capital, at least to some extent. You cannot use infinite resources, and this is putting the limit to growth, because if you run down resources, you're running down the stock of nature, and the stock of nature pins down how productive we are. We need nature to produce. Remember that lake that was dried out. The fisherman, no matter how smart he is, how much capital he has, he cannot get a fish out of this dried out lake. And this means there is a limit to growth in that model, which you would not get in the solar model. And the other key insight is that there's a new source of investment, which is to simply wait. What do I mean by that? If you're saying, I'm giving up some production and therefore use less natural resources, I'm allowing nature to recover. I'm making less fish soup, I take out less fish off the water, and therefore the fish population can regenerate, and the amount of fish in the water can recover, and our stock of nature increases. So this is a form of investment. By not producing, you get investment into natural capital stock. See, this is a passive form of investment. In most other growth models, you have a decision that you forgive consumption in order to invest. That's the same also here, or you forgive consumption because you put people not into the final consumption goods sector, but you put them into the research sector. That's what other growth models would tell you. Here, you also forgive consumption, but you forgive consumption by basically doing nothing or doing less, and therefore taking less resources out of nature and allow nature to recover. So that's, I think, a handy insight that you can show. We won't derive this here. You'll either have to watch another video that I may record or come study in my class, for example, where we cover where we covered those topics. I hope you enjoyed that. Leave some comments if you want to.